There are moments in an astrological cycle when the atmosphere changes so dramatically that you can almost feel it in your body before your mind catches up. And today, June 19th, is one of those moments. What is unfolding now is not some subtle energetic fluctuation that can be dismissed as imagination or coincidence. Something concrete is reaching a turning point in the sky, something that has been gathering momentum beneath the surface for weeks. And for many people, the experience may arrive as a startling flash of recognition. It is the kind of realization that interrupts your thoughts in the middle of an ordinary moment and suddenly rearranges the meaning of everything that came before it. You may find yourself looking back over the past several weeks and understanding, perhaps for the first time, why certain situations unfolded the way they did. If you have been feeling depleted, emotionally stretched thin, or as though every day since the beginning of this month has demanded more from you than you had left to give, there is a reason for that feeling. This pressure did not appear out of nowhere. It has been accumulating layer by layer, event by event, and today marks a moment when that accumulated tension begins to reveal its purpose. What makes this especially important is that three zodiac signs, Leo, Libra, and Aquarius, appear to be standing directly in the path of this revelation. For those signs in particular, the understanding arriving now has the potential to explain struggles, frustrations, and emotional challenges that have seemed impossible to make sense of throughout this month. Before we reach that part of the story, though, we need to examine the road that brought us here, because without understanding the weight we have all been carrying, it is impossible to understand why today's shift feels so significant. If June has felt unusually difficult, if you have questioned your own reactions, doubted your instincts, or wondered why everything suddenly seemed heavier than expected, know that you are not alone. The astrological climate throughout this month has applied pressure almost continuously. The sequence began immediately when Mercury entered Cancer on June 1st. That movement changed the way information flowed through our lives. Rational observations quickly became emotional experiences. Conversations that should have remained straightforward began carrying hidden emotional undertones. People became more sensitive, more reactive, and more likely to interpret words through the lens of personal feelings. Almost overnight, interactions that once felt simple started carrying emotional weight. Then June 3rd arrived, bringing Mercury into a square with Neptune, and that was the moment uncertainty began spreading through collective awareness. Confusion became easier to encounter than clarity. Messages were misunderstood. Intentions became difficult to read. Many people found themselves second-guessing their own judgment, wondering whether they were seeing situations accurately or projecting fears and assumptions onto them. It felt as though a layer of fog had settled over everyday life, making even familiar circumstances difficult to navigate with confidence. Just as people were attempting to regain their footing, another layer of pressure emerged. On June 9th, the Sun opposed Black Moon Lilith, and the emotional atmosphere shifted again. Beneath ordinary interactions, a deeper tension began making itself known. Thoughts that had been carefully hidden away started demanding attention. Feelings that had been pushed aside refused to remain silent. Frustrations that had been swallowed for the sake of peace began pressing against the surface. Many people experienced this as an uncomfortable sense that something unresolved was demanding acknowledgement. It was as though every truth left unsaid was suddenly asking to be heard. Yet even that was only preparing the ground for what would follow. The deeper emotional story of this period unfolded through Venus, and understanding Venus is essential to understanding why so many people have felt exhausted recently. If relationships have seemed unusually complicated, if your confidence has fluctuated unexpectedly, or if interactions with others have left you emotionally drained, Venus has been playing a central role in that experience. The sequence began on June 9th, when Venus joined Jupiter in Cancer. For a brief period, the energy felt expansive and hopeful. Hearts opened. People became more willing to trust, more willing to connect, more willing to believe that emotional safety and genuine closeness were possible. There was warmth in the air, a sense that comfort and understanding could be found through meaningful connection. For a moment, it seemed as though emotional healing might arrive naturally. Yet the story did not remain there. Only a few days later, on June 13th, Venus formed a square to Chiron at a critical degree, and that hopeful opening became a doorway through which old pain could return. Wounds connected to belonging, acceptance, family, and emotional security resurfaced with surprising intensity. Vulnerabilities many believed had already been healed suddenly felt active again. Doubts emerged regarding whether it was truly safe to trust others, whether emotional openness would be met with understanding or disappointment. For many, the experience felt deeply personal, almost as though forgotten insecurities had been awakened without warning. Then another significant shift occurred. Venus entered Leo and immediately moved toward an opposition with Pluto on June 17th. This transit intensified everything. Hidden tensions became impossible to ignore. Unspoken resentments demanded acknowledgement. Power struggles that had existed quietly beneath relationships became visible. Jealousies, fears, and emotional complexities that had remained concealed were suddenly exposed. The reason this energy felt so exhausting is because it forced people into confrontation with truths they would rather have avoided. It highlighted the distance between personal desires and objective reality. It revealed where pride was disguising fear, where control was disguising insecurity, and where appearances were masking deeper emotional needs. For many people, this transit has felt less like a gentle lesson and more like an unavoidable mirror. And as intense as all of this has been, it is important to understand that these experiences have not been random. Every confusion, every emotional trigger, every uncomfortable realization has been building toward the shift that arrives today. The pressure has been preparing something. The questions that emerged throughout these past weeks are approaching answers. The emotional weight many have been carrying is beginning to reveal its purpose. And what happens next may finally explain why this entire journey unfolded exactly the way it did. By the time this week finally arrived, it felt as though many people had reached a breaking point without even realizing it. The emotional reserves that normally help you navigate challenges may have felt depleted. Your thoughts may have been scattered in a dozen different directions. Relationships may have carried a weight that seemed heavier than usual. If that description feels familiar, then what you have been experiencing is not something to dismiss or minimize. It is important because the intensity of the past several weeks was never without purpose. Every uncomfortable conversation, every emotional trigger, every moment of confusion has been preparing the ground for what unfolds today. And what makes this moment so remarkable is that the energy shifts in a way that begins to explain why all of that pressure was necessary in the first place. There is a reason the atmosphere feels different now. There is a reason many people are sensing that something is finally settling into place. And once you see the larger picture, it becomes difficult to unsee it. The first piece of this story begins on the morning of Friday, June 19th, when the moon leaves Leo and enters Virgo. On the surface, that may not sound especially dramatic. After all, the moon changes signs regularly. It is one of the most common movements in astrology. But context changes everything. Astrological events do not exist in isolation. They gain meaning through the larger sequence surrounding them. And after everything that has unfolded since the beginning of June, this particular transition feels far more significant than a routine lunar movement. In fact, it has the potential to become one of the most important emotional recalibrations of the entire year. To understand why, consider the emotional climate we have been moving through. The moon in Leo amplifies expression. It encourages reactions that come directly from the heart. It magnifies the desire to be acknowledged, understood, appreciated, and seen. There is nothing inherently wrong with that energy, but when it unfolds alongside a Venus opposition to Pluto, emotions can become incredibly intense. Every interaction feels charged. Every disappointment feels larger than life. Every insecurity seems impossible to ignore. The emotional volume gets turned all the way up, and after enough days immersed in that atmosphere, even the strongest individuals can begin to feel overwhelmed. It is like spending days inside a room where every voice is speaking at maximum volume. Eventually, exhaustion sets in. Then the moon enters Virgo, and the entire tone changes. The shift feels less like a dramatic breakthrough and more like the moment after a powerful storm has passed. The wind settles. The noise fades. The air becomes clear enough to see what is actually standing in front of you. Suddenly, there is room to think. Suddenly, there is space between your emotions and your reactions. The urgency begins to dissolve, and in its place comes perspective. This is one of the gifts of Virgo energy. Rather than feeding emotional intensity, it asks practical questions. It examines details. It seeks solutions. It looks at a complicated situation and begins separating facts from assumptions, reality from reaction, necessity from distraction. That is why this lunar movement feels so important right now. It arrives precisely when many people need a chance to regain their footing. Imagine standing in the middle of a chaotic room that has been accumulating clutter for weeks. At first, the mess seems overwhelming. You do not know where to begin. Then suddenly something shifts. You pick up one item, then another. Before long, the impossible task starts revealing a simple structure. That is how Virgo often works. It rarely delivers clarity through dramatic revelations. Instead, it arrives through small actions, practical decisions, and grounded observations that gradually transform confusion into understanding. The realization you experience today may not arrive through a lightning bolt of insight. It may emerge while organizing your schedule, cleaning your environment, reviewing a difficult conversation, or finally addressing a responsibility you have been postponing. What once appeared enormous and unmanageable may suddenly reveal itself as a collection of smaller challenges that can be addressed one at a time. That is where the healing begins. It begins when chaos becomes manageable. It begins when you stop spinning in circles and reconnect with what is actually in front of you. Many people are already sensing this energy. There is a growing desire to simplify, to remove unnecessary complications, to clear away distractions and return to what matters. If you have felt that impulse recently, it may be a sign that you are already tuning into this transition. Yet as meaningful as the Virgo moon is, it represents only one half of the story unfolding on June 19th. The deeper significance of this day comes from another movement happening alongside it, and this is where the energy becomes truly extraordinary. Later that same day, Chiron leaves Aries and enters Taurus. This is not the kind of transit that passes quietly. It is not a short-term influence that fades after a few days. It is a major collective shift that alters the background themes of healing for years to come. Chiron has not occupied Taurus for nearly 5 decades. The last passage occurred between 1977 and 1984. Before that, it appeared during the late 1920s and early 1930s. Whenever a cycle spans that much time, its significance extends beyond personal experiences into larger collective themes. Chiron is often associated with the wounded healer because it reveals the place where our deepest vulnerabilities coexist with our greatest potential wisdom. For approximately 8 years, Chiron has traveled through Aries. During that period, many people have confronted wounds connected to identity, independence, self-assertion, and the right to exist authentically. The lessons of Aries often require courage. They ask individuals to fight for themselves, establish boundaries, defend their truth, and prove their worth in environments that challenge them. Over time, that process can become exhausting. Constantly defending your existence takes energy. Constantly proving yourself takes energy. Constantly fighting for recognition takes energy. And for many people, there is a profound weariness surrounding those themes now. As Chiron enters Taurus, the focus of the wound changes. The central question shifts away from whether you have the right to exist and moves toward a different concern altogether. The new question becomes whether you can believe you are enough exactly as you are. Taurus governs value, security, resources, stability, the body, and the physical world. As a result, the healing journey begins exploring our relationship with self-worth, financial security, material comfort, and personal abundance. Beneath many fears about money lies a deeper fear about value. Beneath worries about resources often exists a hidden uncertainty about deservingness. This transit begins illuminating those layers. It asks people to examine what they truly believe they are worth. It asks whether security comes from external conditions or from an internal sense of value that cannot be taken away. What makes this even more fascinating is the historical context. Previous Chiron in Taurus periods coincided with major economic upheavals, including the oil crises of the late 1970s and the Great Depression era during the late 1920s and early 1930s. This does not automatically predict a future crisis. However, it does suggest that society may once again enter a period where questions surrounding value, resources, stability, and worth become increasingly important. The collective conversation begins changing. The assumptions people hold about what has value, what creates security, and what defines success may undergo profound examination. And remarkably, this transition begins on the very same day the moon enters Virgo. The timing is impossible to ignore. One influence encourages practical assessment, grounded thinking, and realistic problem-solving. The other initiates a 7-year journey into healing our relationship with worth and security. Together, they create a powerful message. The emotional fog starts lifting at the exact moment a new chapter of collective healing begins. That alignment feels purposeful. It feels like a carefully timed invitation to stop reacting, start observing, and prepare for a much deeper transformation that is only beginning to reveal itself. The more I studied the timing of these transits, the harder it became to view them as random events happening independently of one another. There is a remarkable sense of order in the way this day unfolds. The sequence itself tells a story. Before the deeper healing begins, something arrives to stabilize the emotional landscape. Before the wound is revealed, something prepares you to face it. That is why the movement of the moon into Virgo earlier, on June 19th, feels so important. Virgo and Taurus belong to the same elemental family. Both are earth signs. Both are concerned with what is tangible, what is sustainable, and what can be built in the real world. Their energies naturally support one another. Virgo creates structure. Taurus creates stability. Virgo sorts through complexity. Taurus establishes lasting value. Together they create an environment where genuine healing can occur without chaos taking over the process. Imagine someone emerging from weeks of emotional turbulence. Their thoughts are racing. Their nervous system is overstimulated. Every conversation feels loaded. Every decision feels urgent. In that state, even a meaningful breakthrough can become overwhelming because there is no inner foundation strong enough to hold it. That is exactly why the order of events matters so much. The Virgo moon arrives first. It slows the emotional momentum. It encourages observation instead of reaction. It creates space between feeling and action. It invites you to organize what has felt scattered. It gently guides your attention away from emotional drama and toward practical reality. It is almost as if the universe pauses everything for a moment and says, "Take a breath, gather yourself, look clearly at what is in front of you." Only after that grounding process begins does Chiron enter Taurus. Only after the nervous system starts settling does the deeper healing journey reveal itself. Had these energies arrived under different circumstances, the experience could have felt far more destabilizing. If Chiron had entered Taurus while emotions were still inflamed by Venus opposing Pluto, and while the moon remained in fiery Leo, many people might have felt consumed by the wounds being activated. The insights could have arrived faster than they could be processed. The vulnerability could have felt too raw to face directly. Instead, the emotional volume is lowered first. The mental clutter begins clearing first. A foundation is established first. Then Chiron steps forward and opens the next chapter. The symbolism is powerful. One energy creates order. The other begins healing. One stabilizes. The other transforms. Together, they create an opening, unlike anything we have experienced so far this month. And while everyone will feel this shift to some degree, there are 3 signs that appear especially connected to the story unfolding today. For Leo, Libra, and Aquarius, the themes activated by these transits are deeply personal. If you carry any of these signs as your sun, moon, or rising sign, the clarity arriving now may feel impossible to ignore. Leo, there is something important you need to understand about what has been happening to you. Over the course of this month, it may have felt as though every issue connected to identity, recognition, relationships, and self-expression has been placed under a microscope. The arrival of Venus in your sign, followed immediately by its opposition to Pluto, intensified everything. Situations that once seemed manageable suddenly felt emotionally charged. Interactions may have exposed hidden tensions. Relationships may have revealed power imbalances that could no longer remain hidden. At times, it may have felt as though you were constantly being challenged to defend your value, justify your choices, or prove your significance. That kind of pressure becomes exhausting after a while. Even the strongest person grows tired of constantly seeking acknowledgement from the outside world. Beneath the surface, there may have been a deeper question emerging. What if your worth does not need to be earned through performance? What if your value exists, whether anyone recognizes it or not? As the moon enters Virgo, a shift begins taking place within your perspective. Attention moves toward your 2nd house, the area associated with resources, finances, and personal value. What makes this transition so significant is not that it creates more drama. It does the opposite. Suddenly, many of the emotional battles that seemed urgent begin losing their grip. The need to be right becomes less important. The need to be noticed becomes less important. The need to win every struggle for validation begins fading into the background. In its place emerges a quieter understanding. A more grounded voice begins speaking. It reminds you that true value is not built through constant displays of strength. It is built through consistency. It is built through patience. It is built through the small actions repeated over time that gradually create something real and lasting. This realization may feel surprisingly liberating because it redirects your energy away from external approval and toward internal development. The insight arriving now is not glamorous. It is practical. Yet that practicality may become the foundation for everything that follows. Then another layer reveals itself. As Chiron enters Taurus, attention shifts toward your 10th house, the area connected to career, achievement, public standing, and reputation. This is where the deeper healing begins. Questions surrounding success may start demanding honest answers. Have you been measuring your worth through accomplishments alone? Have you been expecting recognition to provide a sense of value that can only come from within? Have you been chasing proof of your significance in places where it can never truly be found? These are not easy questions. Yet because the Virgo moon has already provided stability and perspective, you are more prepared to face them. Instead of running from discomfort, you can examine it. Instead of reacting impulsively, you can observe carefully. That shift alone has the potential to change the direction of your future in ways that may not become fully visible until much later. Libra, your experience carries a different emotional tone, but it is no less profound. If this month has felt unusually difficult, There is a reason. Venus, your ruling planet, has been moving through an intense sequence of aspects that have pulled your heart in multiple directions. The conjunction with Jupiter opened the door to hope. It encouraged belief in connection, possibility, and emotional growth. Then the square to Chiron exposed old vulnerabilities that many thought had already healed. Suddenly, insecurities returned. Questions resurfaced. Emotional tenderness became impossible to ignore. Then, the opposition to Pluto arrived and demanded deeper honesty. Relationships that appeared stable may have revealed hidden tensions. Dynamics that seemed balanced may have exposed underlying imbalances. You may have found yourself questioning whether certain connections were truly as secure as they appeared. Through all of this, your natural instinct has likely remained the same. You tried to maintain harmony. You tried to keep everything functioning smoothly. You tried to accommodate others, understand others, support others, and create peace wherever possible. Yet somewhere along the way, there is a chance that your own needs became secondary. There is a chance that your desire to preserve balance required sacrifices that were never meant to be permanent. This is where today's energy becomes so important. As the moon enters Virgo, it activates your 12th house, one of the most private and introspective areas of the chart. At first glance, this might sound intimidating, but its gift is actually profound. The 12th house creates distance from external demands. It invites reflection. It encourages withdrawal from constant stimulation. Most importantly, it offers permission. Permission to stop carrying responsibilities that do not belong to you. Permission to stop solving problems that are not yours to solve. Permission to step away from the endless effort of managing everyone else's emotional reality. The clarity emerging now revolves around boundaries, not symbolic boundaries, not temporary boundaries, real boundaries, practical boundaries. Boundaries that protect your energy, preserve your peace, and remind you that caring for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. And as this realization begins settling into place, you may discover that choosing yourself is not the threat you once believed it to be. It may be the very thing that finally restores the balance you have been searching for all along. What makes this particular Virgo moon so valuable is not that it delivers some dramatic revelation that turns your world upside down overnight. Its strength comes from something much quieter and far more sustainable. It strips away confusion. It removes the emotional distortion that has been clouding your judgment. It allows you to see, with unusual precision, where your energy has been leaking away and where your efforts have been invested in situations that no longer deserve them. For Libra especially, this clarity may feel almost startling in its simplicity. Suddenly, the patterns become obvious. The habits that have been draining you reveal themselves. The places where you have been sacrificing too much of yourself become impossible to ignore. Most importantly, the solutions begin appearing in manageable pieces rather than overwhelming emotional waves. That is the gift of Virgo energy. It does not ask you to transform your entire life in a single moment. It shows you one adjustment, then another, until eventually you realize you are standing in a completely different place than where you began. There is nothing flashy about it. There is no dramatic confrontation required. Yet because the process is so practical, it becomes incredibly effective. At the same time, Chiron's movement into Taurus begins activating your 8th house, bringing attention to themes that run much deeper than surface-level relationship dynamics. This is the territory of intimacy, vulnerability, trust, and shared resources. It is where we merge our lives with others. It is where we learn what it truly means to connect. Over the coming years, a healing process begins around the ways you have approached emotional closeness. Beneath many relationship struggles lies a belief that often goes unnoticed until it is challenged directly. It is the idea that love requires sacrifice of the self. It is the assumption that maintaining connection means suppressing your own needs. It is the fear that choosing yourself might threaten the bond you have with someone else. Chiron, entering Taurus, begins exposing those beliefs so they can finally be examined. The Virgo Moon helps you recognize them without becoming overwhelmed by them. Instead of reacting emotionally, you are given the opportunity to observe carefully. You begin noticing where you have abandoned your own truth in order to preserve harmony. You begin recognizing where compromise quietly became self-erasure. And as that awareness grows, so does your ability to make different choices. Not all at once, not through some dramatic declaration, but through small, deliberate actions that gradually rebuild your relationship with yourself. The freedom that emerges from that process is profound because it is not dependent on anyone else's approval. It comes from knowing that connection no longer requires losing who you are. Aquarius, your experience today carries a different kind of breakthrough, one that begins inside your mind. If the past several years have felt unusually intense, there is a reason. Pluto has been moving through your sign since 2023, and that influence alone represents a level of transformation that many people never fully understand unless they experience it firsthand. Pluto does not make superficial changes. It digs beneath appearances. It dismantles outdated identities. It exposes hidden fears and forces evolution at the deepest levels. Then this month added another layer of intensity when Venus opposed Pluto directly across your first house. Suddenly, every question connected to identity, independence, relationships, and personal authenticity became amplified. The pressure has been relentless. You may have found yourself examining who you are, how you show up in the world, and whether the life you are living truly reflects the person you are becoming. When that kind of pressure builds, your natural response often follows a familiar pattern. Rather than staying with the emotional intensity, you retreat into thought. You analyze, you theorize, you examine possibilities from every angle. Your mind races ahead into future scenarios, alternative outcomes, and endless possibilities. While that ability can be a gift, under stress it can become exhausting. Energy becomes scattered. Focus becomes fragmented. The mind becomes crowded with possibilities, but disconnected from the present moment. If that sounds familiar, then the shift arriving today may feel like a tremendous relief. As the moon enters Virgo, it begins pulling your attention back into reality, not theoretical reality, actual reality. The physical environment around you, the tangible details directly in front of you. What is fascinating is that the clarity you experience may not arrive through meditation, spiritual insight, or philosophical reflection. Instead, it may emerge through your surroundings. You may suddenly feel compelled to organize, to clean, to simplify, to sort through neglected paperwork, to clear clutter from rooms that have become chaotic, to create order where disorder has quietly accumulated. At first glance, these actions may seem insignificant, but they are deeply connected to the energy unfolding in your chart. For Aquarius, physical organization often mirrors mental organization. The environment acts as a reflection of the inner world. When your surroundings become clearer, your thoughts often follow. When external clutter is removed, internal noise begins quieting as well. This is why the urge to create order should not be dismissed. It is not merely housekeeping, it is healing. It is a practical expression of psychological alignment. As the physical space becomes lighter, the mental burden often becomes lighter too. The result can feel immediate. A sense of calm replaces mental overstimulation. Decisions become easier. Priorities become clearer. The future feels less overwhelming because your attention returns to what is actually within your control. Chiron entering Taurus deepens this process by activating your fourth house, the area associated with home, family, roots, and emotional security. The healing journey beginning now asks an important question. Do you genuinely feel safe within your own life? Do you trust your foundation? Do you feel at home within yourself? These themes reach far beyond physical shelter. They touch the deepest layers of belonging and security. The wound being illuminated concerns your relationship with stability itself. Yet once again, the Virgo Moon arrives first to provide support. Rather than approaching these questions through abstract analysis, you are encouraged to engage them through practical action. Create order. Build consistency. Strengthen your environment. Establish routines that support your well-being. Through these grounded choices, something deeper begins healing. Gradually, the sense of safety you've been searching for starts emerging from within rather than from external circumstances. It becomes a process of returning to yourself, one practical step at a time. There is another reason today's energy matters so much, and it extends beyond the immediate experiences of any single zodiac sign. The clarity arriving now is not simply a reward for surviving a difficult astrological period. It serves a larger purpose. It prepares us for what comes next. On June 20th, the day immediately following this shift, Uranus forms an exact square to the lunar nodes. This is not a subtle transit. It carries the potential for sudden developments, unexpected turns, rapid changes, and disruptions that arrive without warning. Uranus is famous for shaking people awake. It introduces variables that cannot be predicted. It changes direction quickly and demands adaptation. Because Uranus is currently in Gemini, information becomes a major catalyst. News can arrive unexpectedly. Conversations can alter plans. Revelations can force re-evaluation. Decisions may need to be made faster than anticipated. Communication itself can become the trigger for significant change. This is precisely why the timing of today's reset feels so meaningful. Without the grounding influence of the Virgo Moon, many people might approach the Uranus square from a place of exhaustion, confusion, and emotional reactivity. Under those conditions, sudden developments could easily trigger panic, impulsiveness, or fear-driven choices. Instead, the cosmos provides a window of preparation. There is approximately a full day available to reconnect with stability, establish clarity, strengthen boundaries, and return awareness to the body. Those who embrace that opportunity may discover that the events of June 20th feel very different than expected. Rather than being thrown off course, they may find themselves responding with surprising steadiness. Instead of reacting emotionally, they may navigate changes with clarity. Instead of being overwhelmed by uncertainty, they may recognize new possibilities hidden within disruption. That difference matters because choices made from clarity create entirely different outcomes than choices made from fear. If there is one message worth carrying forward from everything discussed today, it is this: June 19th represents far more than another date on the calendar. It functions as a threshold. The Virgo Moon helps restore order to the mind, body, and nervous system. Chiron's entry into Taurus begins a 7-year chapter devoted to healing issues connected to value, security, and self-worth. Together, they create a foundation strong enough to support whatever changes arrive next. And if recent weeks have left you feeling overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted, or uncertain about where you are headed, remember this: you are not failing. You are not unraveling. You have been moving through one of the most demanding astrological periods of the year. The fact that you continue showing up, searching for understanding, and remaining engaged with your own growth says more about your resilience than you may realize. The challenges themselves have not necessarily disappeared. What changes today is your ability to see them clearly, and clarity changes everything. Once confusion fades, movement becomes possible again. One practical step, one grounded choice, one deliberate action at a time. That is the wisdom of Virgo. That is the invitation of this moment. And perhaps that is exactly what all of us need right now. Before we close, I want to thank you for spending this time with me and following this journey all the way through. If this message spoke to your experience in any way, I would be grateful if you subscribe to the channel. Your support genuinely makes a difference. I would also love to hear what this month has been like for you. Share your zodiac sign and tell me what themes have been showing up in your life recently. I read every comment, and hearing your stories helps remind all of us that we are navigating these changes together. Be especially gentle with yourself today. Honor the reset that is taking place. And until next time, take care and keep moving forward, one grounded step at a time.